Greetings, friend, and welcome to the Between the Covers podcast, where we are working every day to remove the self-limiting beliefs that are preventing us from becoming the heroes of our own stories. I am Marcus Barr, and today we're going to have a little bit of a deeper, darker conversation, I guess is the best way to put it, because with everything that is going on these days, I think it is important for us to take some time to talk about the corrupting influence of power and how that happens. This being a podcast where we focus on being the heroes of our own stories, it's important for us to remember the old adage that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that is something that we are seeing with a lot of world leaders today. Here in the United States, we're seeing it all over the place. We're seeing it also in Israel. We're seeing it, I believe, in Turkey is another one. We're seeing it in Russia. People who get into positions of power and they want to consolidate that power end up being some of those who experience the highest level of corruption from what that power can bring. This is something that very much brings out heroes, because there's even some quotes out there saying that you can't be a villain if you don't have heroes, and you can't be a hero if you don't have a villain. Because, again, people that we classify as villains, they are the protagonist in their own story. And so I have a lot of quotes here. And we're just going to take a look at some of these quotes here. Some of them are from real life figures, and there's a lot that we can break down. And then there are some from real life and fictional characters who are embodying something different. Because one of the things that has been coming up is the language that people in power are using. It's very telling what is going on beneath the surface when you hear certain language coming from people. And the words that people say are important. The actions that they say, or that the actions that they do, are even more important. And we currently have a president who decided, or I think it was in 2016, he was campaigning saying that he was going to be a president of peace. And we haven't seen really much of that. And in fact, he has turned around in his second presidency to pretty much be a president of war. He has killed many world leaders or kidnapped them. The initial bombing in Iran took down a lot of very important people, and you kind of see this really bizarre, I don't even really know how to put this. His words and what we're actually seeing are not coinciding, and he keeps changing it. It is definitely a moving of the goalpost, because in one moment he's saying that the war is over, and yet we're still spending like billions of dollars a day in order to keep up this war. He has made promises that things were going to be more sustainable, that we were going to be able to afford more in groceries and just have a much more affordable life. We haven't seen that. Prices have not gone down. And whenever he's pressed on it, he can't really give any kind of... He gives really bizarre examples of proof and makes them like the norm around the world. I remember seeing something about him saying that gas was finally below $2 a gallon, and that was one gas station in a very remote location, I think, and it absolutely is not how it is throughout the world. And so, let's take a look at people who are being corrupted by power and what this is doing. So we're looking at Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense. I refuse to call him the title that he wants to be referred to as, because even though he is constantly committing war atrocities and is just so focused on things being brutal and violent, I feel it is more important for us to remember the purpose of that role is to defend, not to cause harm. And so these are Pete Hegseth's actual words that he said during a press conference when he was talking about how they were wanting to have an additional $200 billion for the military in this war. He says, $200 billion. I think that number could move. It takes money to kill bad guys. That's very telling right there. People who are in these positions of power and have been corrupted by this power, they use language to demonize these people. They use this kind of language to make you not see the humanity of the people that they are against. We're talking about someone who is in one of the most powerful positions in the US, who has so much control over the military, referring to people in Iran as bad guys. That is not how we should be referring to people. This is what corruption looks like. And he says, so we are going back to Congress and our folks there to ensure that we are properly funded for what's been done, for what we may have to do in the future. Ensure that our ammunition is, that everything is refilled, and not just refilled, but above and beyond. What's that telling? They are looking to stockpile just tools that are only meant to harm and cause pain and death. I mean, President Trump, as you said, rebuilt the military in his first term. Didn't think that he'd use it as dynamically in his second, but he had, so thank goodness he did that. Yeah, thank goodness he did that. An investment like this is to say, hey, we'll replace everything that was spent. And now that we're reviving our defense industrial base and rebuilding the arsenal of freedom and cutting deals like our great deputy secretaries here is doing, long lead times on exquisite munitions, we're going to be refilled faster than anyone imagined. Munitions being referred to as exquisite? I'm sorry. That's not how you should be referring to munitions, to firearms, to things that are only going to cause harm. And that they are just trying to build up so much because they are anticipating more from these, quote, bad guys, unquote. And I think, we're also still dealing with the environment that Joe Biden created, which was depleting those stockhold and not sending them to our military, but to Ukraine, which is when every time we reach back and look at any sort of challenge we have, it goes back to, well, send it to Ukraine. Talk about passing the buck here, if I am so bold as to say. At some point, they need to stop blaming the previous president and start to admit that the problems that they're facing are of their own making. But, they're not going to do that because they have been corrupted. Ultimately, we think this should be these These munitions are better spent in our own interests at this point, and this kind of funding bill is going to ensure we are properly funded going forward. The last thing we need is more money going into our military, not with how we're using it, not with how we are demonizing all of these people, saying that they are bad guys, that they are evil, even to the point that they say they deserve this. And where is a lot of this coming from? Not only is it coming from our deranged president, because he's saying a lot of these things too, it is also coming from other influential people within the lives of these people who are in power. I am now going to turn to Brooks Potteiger. And if you haven't heard this individual's name, it wasn't one until I heard about just within like the last couple of weeks, who is a pastor. He is a pastor at the church that Pete Hegseth attends. And he was on a podcast. And let's take a look at what he says. The public enemies. These are the orcs at the gate. We're off to a great start right now. The public enemies. And I don't know exactly what he's referring to, but let's take a look at what is going on politically right now. We are talking about people who are being rounded up by ICE agents. We're looking at individuals who have been killed and murdered by these agents on the ground. We're talking about the pressure that has been applied to protesters observing their freedom to protest what is going on in the government, their freedom of speech, and their freedom to assemble. These are the orcs at the gate. That's pretty telling language, but we continue. You are not called to love the barbarian horde that is planning to break into your city and, pillage, plunder, rape, and mutilate you and your people. Okay. Barbarian horde. Break into your city, pillage, plunder, rape, and mutilate. That is divisive language. The whole purpose of it is to divide people into us and them. And calling people orcs, calling them barbarians, that definitely does not show the humanity of these people. And yet he continues. You don't love that horde. That is your enemy, and you pray. This is where you have imprecatory psalms. This is where you pray strongly. The psalmist is not shy. God, destroy them. Make them as dung on the ground. So these people are no better than fecal matter that's just meant to be swept away, cleaned up, gotten rid of. Boy, that's really showing the humanity, isn't it? Right? So, but Madison and I were talking about this, and so I say, now even in the debate, you might have seen them, but that I had on campus the other day, if this is like a jumble of words, I tried my best to transcribe exactly what was said here. Some of this might have been my own failings. However, I promise you most of this came directly from Brooks. I pray that God kills him. Kills who? James Talarico, the Christian Democratic representative who is trying to get a seat within the government. James Talarico, who calls himself a Christian, who has that as a part of his identity. And this is a Christian pastor saying that he prays that God kills him. Oh, wait, but there's a caveat here. Ultimately, that means killing his heart and raising him up to new life in Christ. That's the first thing. And then he and the podcast host go back and forth talking about how it's like being crucified with Christ and, being reborn in the Spirit. So, one of the things that they're saying here is that James Talarico is not a true Christian. He has not accepted Christ in his life. He has not been reborn in Christ. I am just so fucking tired of all of this Christianese language here. And if would not be within God's will to do so, as in to kill his heart and raise him up to new life in Christ, stop him by any means necessary, O God. This is power that has been corrupted. This is someone who has been corrupted by power. Someone who looks at an opponent and doesn't see someone with different views, doesn't see someone that you can debate with, that you can meet at a table and converse and share ideas. We're talking about seeing someone solely as an enemy, seeing someone only as an orc at the gate, as a barbarian, as someone that if you cannot have your all-powerful God win his heart over, then you eliminate him. These are not the only words that Brooks Potteiger has said. And again, these are his exact words. The institution of slavery is not inherently evil. I know many of you guys are upset by that. I mean, I am upset by his words saying that slavery is not inherently evil, but in this clip, I think this actually came from one of his sermons. He uses sound effects from the Metal Gear Solid games, something that has been a part of YouTube and gaming culture for so long that it absolutely bothers me that it's being used for this kind of evil rhetoric. I can get my words out. And yes, I am aware that I just referred to his rhetoric as evil, because from my perspective, this is very evil. Some of you guys are saying, I've been saying that for years. Now, I'll take it a step further. It is not inherently evil to own another human being. And here comes the Metal Gear Solid sound effect again. I know, just wait. Some of you guys are really upset, but let's talk through this because it is very important that every Christian affirm what I just said. That not only should we affirm it, every Christian in today's society should be able to defend what I just said. Every Christian in the U.S. should be able to defend and affirm that there is nothing wrong with owning someone. That is not right. That is looking at other people as downright demeaning. And this is something that came up when the slave trade of Africans to European nations and the Americas was a huge, booming business. The people who were trading in these slaves were people that looked at these Africans as less than. They were less than human. They were no different than beasts. And we have someone, a prominent Christian pastor, who speaks to every Sunday the Secretary of Defense of this current administration, and has an influence on our president, says these people that we want to enslave, it is okay for us to do so. They are less than human. This is how power corrupts. Going back to Brooks' words, okay, every Christian should be able to defend it. Big evangelicalism has been getting this wrong for years. Basically, since the Genesis, since the advent of Big Eva, we haven't had a good answer for the slavery issue. All right, Christians in America have been led astray on this topic. They've been led to believe things that the Bible doesn't teach. And when you go beyond the Bible, there are dire consequences. Where is this coming from? Where is this notion that it is okay to have slaves? It is not evil to own other people. It's coming from holy scriptures from the Copper Age that we have turned into the guiding light of our modern age. This is, going back to spiral dynamics, very red and blue. We as a society need to move away from this. And that's what this whole American experiment has been about. We have these prominent people who have megaphones in society saying that people who do not believe the same as they do are bad guys. They are orcs, because a lot of these people are big fans of using Lord of the Rings kind of examples. And that also bugs me, because I'm a fan of Lord of the Rings, and they're taking something that I absolutely enjoy and are absolutely ruining it. However, we are seeing the impacts of this. We are seeing the evil from these people. We are seeing the blatant disregard for life. We are seeing how they are turning people against each other, how they are othering others, how they have to protect themselves from what? People who look and believe differently than they do? As a xenophile, that makes no sense. We are so much better when we do not isolate ourselves, and when we do not ostracize others, and we prevent them from having a voice at the table. So, with those wonderful quotes still leaving a sour and bitter taste on my tongue, I want to focus on and end our time here looking at quotes from heroes, people who have stood up to these power structures, people who have given of themselves in ways that most of these people that have these horrible, demeaning things to say would never do. Joseph Campbell is quoted as saying, "A hero is someone who has given his or her life to something bigger than one's self." This is important because we take a look at a lot of people who are running society today, and they're not making these decisions for something bigger than themselves. They are making these decisions in order to bolster themselves at the cost of others. This is why there are so many politicians that are saying that they need to stop members of the legislature and those who are in the executive branch from being able to trade in stocks, because they use this information in order to set themselves up for very pretty and cozy retirement with information that other people do not have. It's effectively insider trading. They're not doing this for their constituents. And that is one of the things that has me respecting someone like John Dureski as much as I do, because with the times that I have interacted with him, he has shared it is his job to represent the people of this legislative district. That is what is important. Not what he wants, but what the people of the 4th District of Washington State want. This is important because so many of these people in power, they don't care what their constituents think. In fact, there's a lot of members from the GOP that are doing everything they can to avoid town halls in order to speak with their constituents, because they know they have done terrible things and have pissed these people off. Moving to some fictional characters. Aragorn says, "There is always hope." That one sentence is diametrically opposed to everything that was said by Brooks and Pete. They were only looking at harm. They were looking at damage. They were looking at demeaning others. Aragorn is bringing hope. And he says, "If by my life or death I can protect you, I will." That is heroic. If by my life or death I can protect you, I will. Where is any of that in the much longer quotes I shared in the beginning? Where is this life or death, I can protect you, I will? Samwise, one of my favorites now. "There's some good in the world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for." Think about what Pete and Brooks said. What are they saying about there being good in the world? No, they only look at the evil. They only look at what is different from what they believe and from what they think. Katniss, "I never wanted any of this. We keep each other alive. That's what we do." And probably one of the most, and this came very early on in the Hunger Games, one of the most important and valuable things that Katniss said, "I volunteer as tribute." Why is that so important? Do you think the Secretary of Defense is going to do anything to volunteer to be on the war front that he has created? Do you think that Brooks, an evangelical Christian pastor, is going to do anything to get on the front lines in order to put himself at risk other than criticism? No. I do not see these people doing that. Why? Because they would have to give up their power in order to do so. There is a chance they could lose the influence and the power that they have. They would not volunteer as tribute. Steve Rogers. "There are men laying down their lives. I got no right to do any less than them. I don't like bullies. I don't care where they're from." I have so much respect for the character of Steve Rogers, or Captain America, because he sees these injustices and he's like, I have to do what I can. And he knows, he has seen how this power has corrupted so many. And thanks to the suggestion of my partner Libby, my beautiful, wonderful wife. She suggested Aerith Gainsborough and Tifa Lockhart from Final Fantasy VII, and I found some good quotes from these two. So Aerith says, "The Shinra Electric Power Company isn't the real enemy. I promise you, there is a much bigger threat. I just want to do everything in my power to help all of you and the planet." One of the things that is very common from these people that have been corrupted by power is they are masters at manipulating people to turn against each other. Think about a lot of the promises or a lot of the words that the GOP had said, that the people who are taking the jobs and taking tax money, they were immigrants. They were not people like you. And yet, with all of this being said, there is a much bigger threat, as Aerith said. The people who have consolidated so much financial wealth and power. These are the people who are a much bigger threat. Aerith is also quoted as saying, "We need to make the most of the time we have, to live our lives the way we want to live. Every minute, every moment matters." Do you think that these people in power would make a statement about how every minute, every moment matters, that we must make the most of the time we have? I don't think so. I honestly think these people would focus so much on the harm and the pain that they can cause others in order to achieve their end goals of bolstering themselves. And Tifa Lockhart. I love some of these quotes from Tifa. "I don't care. I don't want anyone else to die. Please." Do you think Pete Hegseth would make such a statement that he doesn't want anyone else to die? Do you think Brooks Potteiger would make such a statement that he just doesn't want anyone else to die? No. These two are preaching the deaths of others, the enslavement of others. "When the rest of them ran, you were there for me. You stayed when I needed you most. If that's not a hero, then I don't know what is. You stayed when I needed you most. When the rest of them ran, you were there for me." That is absolutely heroic. Absolutely. It is important for us to recognize how power corrupts people. And if you have absolute power, then it does corrupt you absolutely. It is so unfortunate that the people who would be the best at governing and running this nation are not the people who will. Why? Because they don't want that power. They don't want to have that kind of responsibility that is going to cause corruption. They want to live their best lives, and they want to see others thrive. That is not something that we see very often in politics today. We're seeing people that just want the power. We are seeing people who just want to enforce their beliefs and their values on other people. Now, I'm not saying that they don't have good values. I learned so much from my time in the Christian religion. There were some good things that they taught me. And yet, I can also tell you as a teacher and as a coach, you can't get anyone to buy into what you are enforcing. That's not how it works. They have to come to you. They have to be curious. They have to want that desire, that change. But if things are working for them, then they're not going to buy in to what you're giving them, even if you give it to them at gunpoint, even if you threaten violence. That's how power corrupts. And we're seeing it so much in society today. I never, ever thought that I would live through a time such as this. I don't envy anyone who is in a less privileged position than I am, because this is hard for me. And I know it's even harder for others who are not white, cisgendered American men. So when you're hearing these messages from these people in power, look at it with some serious scrutiny. Pay attention to their words. Pay attention to their actions. That is going to tell you more about what they find valuable, whether it is the betterment of the people who are under them, or if it's just to build up their own portfolio, if it's just to make lives miserable for people that they define as other, people that they define as the bad guys, the orcs at the gate, the barbarian horde. Pay attention. Really pay attention to that. That is not even with the things that they're saying. I will say that these things are evil. And yet, I also remember that these people think they are heroes in their stories. I can still see that humanity, even though I know what they're doing is wrong. Even though it is a terrible, terrible abuse of that power. They are still humans, trying to do the best that they can. That doesn't mean it absolves them of any pain and harm that they have caused. And I do sincerely hope that these people face proper justice for what they have done. We'll talk again next week. We'll have another hero study. And I hope that you are, as we're nearing the midway point of 2026, I hope that you are taking care of yourself, that you are surrounding yourself with people who love and care for you, and people who value you for who you are. And until next time, live strong for today.